Hi everyone, very good evening to all of you and welcome back. In this video, let's learn about factors and multiples, and let's discuss what are factors and what are multiples. So let me take a number. Suppose I take a number 12. Suppose I take a number 12. If I divide 12 by 1, so this is 12. And if you divide it, you would get 12 here, and this would be 0, 0. Now you know that dividend is equal to divisor plus multiplied by, divisor multiplied by quotient plus remainder. So in this case, you have dividend as 12. This 12 is dividend. Then you have 1 as divisor. You have 12 as quotient, and then you have 0 as remainder. And therefore you would say that we can write it like this: 1 multiplied by 12, because 0 is remainder is 0. Now whenever you divide any number by a number, and if you get remainder as 0, then that would be the exact divisor of that particular number. In this case, when you divided 12 by 1 and you got remainder as 0, and therefore you would say that 1 is the exact divisor of the number 12, and therefore the exact divisor would be the factor of that number. So what would be the definition of a factor? A factor of any number would be the exact divisor of that number, right? So a factor of any number would be the exact divisor of that number. This is very important. And the exact divisor means that you will get the remainder as 0. Now why don't you divide 12 by 12? Try it. You divide 12 by 12. So divide number 12 by 12, and again you would get 0 as a remainder, and therefore you would say that, hey, even 12 is the exact divisor of 12, and therefore 12 is a factor of 12. 12 is also a factor of 12, and that means that 12 is the exact divisor of 12 because you're getting remainder as 0. So here when you wrote 12 is equal to 1 multiplied by 12, then in that case you got 1 also, that was a factor of 12, and 12 also, that is a factor of 12. So let me divide 12 by 2. You divide 12 by 2. Divide it. 2. Quotient will be 6. This would go and you would get remainder as 0. Now in this case, you would write, on the basis of this equation, you would write that 12 is equal to divisor into quotient plus remainder is 0. So you wrote it like this. And now you know that here 2 is the exact divisor of 12, and since the exact divisor would be the factor of that number, therefore 2 would be the factor of 12. And now, like in this case, when you wrote 12 as 1 multiplied by 12, where you got that 1 is the factor, and also 12 would be the factor of 12. Similarly, 6 would also be the factor of 12 in this case. And to check that, just divide 12 by 6 and you would get 2. This is 12 and this is 0. Now you can see that the remainder is 0, and therefore 6 is the exact divisor of 12, and therefore 6 is the factor of 12. Now divide 12 by 3. If you divide 12 by 3, then you would get 4 as quotient and remainder would be 0 again, and therefore you would say that, hey, 3 is the exact divisor of 12, and therefore 3 is also a factor of 12. So you would write 12, that is dividend is equal to divisor 3 into quotient plus remainder is 0. Now 12 is equal to 3 multiplied by 4. 3 is a factor, and on the basis of this one and on the basis of this one, you could say that 4 is also a factor. You can cross check that. This will be 12 and this is 0. So what you see here is the quotient of an exact divisor would also be the factor, right? From this one, and from this one, we could say that even the quotient would be the exact divisor or the factor of that particular number. So what are the factors of 12? From this one, from this one, from this one, and from this one, we could say that, hey, the factors of 12 are 1 and then 2 and then 3, then 4, then 6, and finally 12. So these are the factors of 12 on the basis of these three results that we got by dividing 12 by different numbers. So the factors of 12 would be these numbers, right? Now say this, 12 is equal to 1 multiplied by 12. Now this number 12 is the multiple of 1 and 12, is a multiple of 1 and 12. This number 12 is a multiple of 2 and 6. This 12 is a multiple of 3 and 4. 3 and 4. That means that multiple would be like factor multiplied by factor. Okay, multiple would be factor multiplied by factor, because in this case 1 and 12 were the factors of 12, and therefore 12 would be the multiple of 1 and 12. It's simple, like when you write it like 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8. Excuse me. Therefore you say that 2 is a multiple of 2, 4 is a multiple of 2, 6 is a multiple of 2, 8 is a multiple of 2, right? Similarly, 2 is a multiple of 1, right? Because you can write it like this, 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, right? 4 is multiple of 2, 6 is multiple of 3, 8 is multiple of 4. So multiple is equal to factor multiplied by factor, factor times factor. So this is what we know about factors and multiples, and let me take one more example so that it gets completely clear to you. Like let us take 10. Let us take 10. Now what would be the first factor? The first factor would always be 1, and whenever you are asked to find the factors, what you have to do is, like in this case, in this example, you have to find the factors of 10. You have to start from 1, you have to start from the number 1, and you have to go up to you have to go up to the number 10. So there are two factors which are always fixed, there are two factors which are always fixed that you'll get for sure. One is the first one would always be the number 1. This is for sure that this will be the factor, and the next number would be that number itself. That number itself would be the factor of that particular number. So 1 and 12 are for sure. So you can write 10 as 1 multiplied by 10, like you saw here. 12 was 1 multiplied by 12. So 1 and that particular number itself would be the two fixed factors. Now you have to find the other factors. So the way would be start from 1 and keep on dividing this particular number for which you have to find the factors by every number. So if you divide this number 10 by 2, that is, the next number would be 2 here, next number would be 2 here. So if you divide this number 10 by 2, you would get 5 here, and this would be 10, and therefore 0, and therefore you could write it as 2, that is divisor into quotient. Now you know that from the previous example that for this number 10, 2 would be the factor and also 5 would be the factor, right? So also 5 would be the factor. So the next two factors are 2 and 5. These are the two next factors. So you got 1 here, you got 2 here, now you have got 5 here. You have got 5 here. Now let's divide by 3. Divide by 3. Can you divide it? Is 3 the exact divisor of 10? No, because if you divide it by, if you take the quotient as 3, you would get here 9, and you would get 1 as a remainder. You got 1 as a remainder, therefore 1 is not 0, and therefore 3 is not the exact divisor. 3 is not exact divisor. So leave 3, move on to 4. You can divide 4 by 10. Can you divide it? If you take quotient as 2, here you would get 8. This would give you remainder as 2. Again, 4 is not the exact divisor. There is no need to check for 5 because you have found that 5 is the exact divisor here. And if you would divide by 6, you would not get 6 as exact divisor. For 7, you would not get 7 as the exact divisor of 10. Neither for 8, neither for 9, and for 10, you know that 10 would always be the factor of 10, because we saw that the two fixed factors, are always 1 and that particular number itself. So in this case of 10, there are 4 factors. So for 10, you have 1, then you have 2, then you have 5, and then you have 10. So these are the factors of 10. Okay, so what would be the multiple in this particular case? 10 would be the multiple. This 10 would be the multiple. 10 is multiple of 2 and 5. Similarly, here in case of this one, 10 multiplied by is equal to 1 multiplied by 10. So this 10 is multiple of 1 and 10. I hope that the concept of factors and multiple is clear to you, and let me quickly remind it that any exact divisor of that particular number, for which you have to find the factors, the exact divisor would be the factor, and there are two fixed factors. The first one would be the number 1, and then the second one would be, for two fixed factors would be 1 and that particular number itself. Okay, thanks for watching. Factors and multiples. So the points that we would discuss here Some points might look familiar to you that we discussed in the part 1. So the first point is that 1 is a factor of every number. And if you remember here, I told you that there would be two fixed factors. There would be two fixed factors always, and that would be the number 1. The number 1 would always be a fixed factor of any number, and the next fixed factor would be that number itself. In this example, we saw for 10 that 10 would be the fixed factor and 1 would be the fixed factor. So similarly, you take any number. I take 22. So for 22, 1 is the factor of every number, and therefore for 22 you can write as 1 multiplied by 22, right? You remember that? And therefore we could say that, hey, 1 is the factor of 22. In fact, you take any number and 1 would always be the factor of any number. You take any number. Next point is that every number is a factor of itself. Same point repeated again. What we saw here, that 10, in this case 10 is the factor of itself, and therefore if you take any number, like say 55, say 1000, or so on, any number, so 55 and 1000 would be the factor of itself, right? If I take 10, then the two fixed factors that is always be there would be 1 and the next one would be 10. The third point is every factor of a number is an exact divisor of that number. And if you remember, we discussed here, right? We discussed that, hey, a factor of any number would be the exact divisor of that number. Exact divisor of that number. And by the exact divisor, what we mean? We mean is that exact divisor is the one which always gives remainder as 0. If you divide any number, by a number, and if the remainder is 0, then that number would be the exact divisor, and the exact divisor is called the factor of that number. What's the next point? Next point is every factor is less than or equal to that number. So suppose we took example of 12. We took example of 12 here. So what it's saying that if you look at this sentence, it says that every factor of a number is an exact divisor. Sorry, this one. Every factor is less than or equal to that number. So you took for 12, and we saw that for 12 the factors were 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 6, and then 12. So these are the factors. Now you could see that the factors are always either smaller or equal to 12, right? Because here you have 12 as a factor, and that is equal to 12. Now 6 is smaller than 12, 4 is smaller than 12, 3 is smaller than 12, 2 is smaller than 12, and 1 is smaller than 12. So even if you take for 10, what would be the factors of 10? It would be 1, that would be fixed one, always 1 is always a factor of every number, then would be 2, then would be 5, and then would be 10. So 10 is equal to 10, and 5 is smaller than 10, 2 is smaller than 10, and 1 is smaller than 10. And that is what this point is saying, that every factor is less than or equal to that number, and that holds true for every number. Next point is number of factors of a given number is finite, right? So in this example, you have, how many factors do you have? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you have 6 factors for 12. In this case, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have 4 factors. So if you take any number and if you count the number of factors for that particular number, that number would always be finite. That would always be finite. That means you could count that number. You could count that number. Okay, what's the number of count for the factors? Next point is every multiple of a number is greater than or equal to that number. Very simple. If I ask you, hey, write the multiples of 7. So you would say that, hey, multiples of 7 is 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, 7 times 5 is 35, and then you will get 42, then 49, and so on, right? So that's, if you see here, your multiple, that is 7 is a multiple of 7, 14 is a multiple of 7, 21 is a multiple of 7, 28 is a multiple of 7, and similarly for other numbers. Now you would see that any multiple of a number, every multiple of a number is greater than or equal to that number. So 7 is equal to 7, but 14 is greater than 7, right? 14 is greater than 7. 21, which is a multiple of 7, is greater than 7. 28, that is multiple of 7, is greater than 7. So what's the difference between the factor and multiple of any number? Factor would always be smaller or equal to that number. The factors of any particular number would always be equal to or smaller to that number, but it's reverse in the case of multiples. Multiples of any number would always be greater than or equal to that particular number. As you could say here, first the multiple of 7 start from 7, so 7 is equal to 7, but then you move on to 14, which is greater than 7. Then you move on to multiple 21. 21 is greater than 7, then to 28, then to 35, and then to 42. Now this is the point number 7, and the point number 7 says that the number of multiples of a number is infinite. So we saw that the number of factors of a number is finite, right? If you remember that we saw for 12, the factors were 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and then 12. So here you had 6 factors. But if someone says that, hey, go on for, how many multiples you could get for 7? So you would say this is 7 multiplied by 6, 7 times 7, then 7 times 8, and so on. You will go on, then 7 multiplied by 100. Then you would go on and then on, somewhere you would reach 7 times 1000, right? This would be 7000. Then you would go on and somewhere you would get, hey, 7 times 10,000. You would get 70,000. And then you would go on, and it's not going to stop anywhere, because you don't have any largest possible number. A number could be, you cannot even think of that number. It would be larger than what you are seeing here. So that's what it's saying, that the number of multiples of a number is infinite, because it would be 70,000, then it would be 70 lakhs something, then more than that. Okay, so that's infinite. You cannot have the number of counts of the multiples of any particular number. The next point is every number is a multiple of itself, similar to the case of factor. We saw in the case of 10 and then 12 or any number that the 1 and 10 would always be the factor of 10. 1 and 12, so 12 would always be the factor of 12. So similarly in the case of multiple, so you could see that here you could see 7 is the multiple of 7. Similarly, you can write for 8. If you write 8 times 1, you would get 8. So 8 is a multiple of 8. Similarly, you could write 9 times 1 is 9. So 9 is a multiple of 9. 10 times 1 would be 10. So 10 would be the multiple of 10, and that's what it's saying, that every number is a multiple of itself. You go on doing this, like 100 times 1. So 100 is multiple of 100. 100 is multiple of 1. So you'll always get this point that every